researchers from Pan India and from different faculties. They are from science faculty, commerce faculty, management, forensic science as well, then education, law department. Even we have participants from tourism as well. Okay. So we will begin this particular session. Over to you, Nahida madam.
Thank you so much, ma'am. A good morning and a very warm welcome to our esteemed resource person, the course coordinator, Dr. Madhuri Sawant, respected faculty members of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Marathwada University, and participants who have joined us from across different states of India. We welcome you to this fifth day of the online refresher course titled IKS Skill Based in Curriculum Development, organized by UGC Malviya Mission Training Center under the aegis of Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar Marathwada University, Chhatrapati Shivaji Nagar. It's my privilege to introduce our esteemed resource person, Guru Parwati Dutta, classical dance artist, guru, researcher, choreographer, educationist. Born in a family of reformists and freedom fighters, Professor Parvati Datta is a noticed artist known for her undying commitment and awakened conscience towards society, Indian traditional arts, and national heritage. An evolved artist, thinker, researcher, writer, and dedicated arts administrator, Professor Parvati Datta is the founder director of Mahagami Gurukul, Aurangabad, Chhatrapati Shambhaji Nagar, Maharashtra. She is an active commentator of arts, heritage, ecology, Indology, education, and media studies, apart from being an accomplished Kathak and Odissi dancer, choreographer, and teacher. She's credited with introducing two classical dances, Kathak and Odissi, in Marathwada region and producing three generations of promising artists through her committed teaching and guidance. She's also credited to designing and introducing the first degree program in Odissi and Kathak in this region, successfully conducting it since the last 6 years. A senior disciple of Pandit Birju Maharaj, Guru Madhavi Mudgal, and Guru Kelucharan Mohapatra. She's a Kathak and Odissi performer, having traveled extensively to more than 30 nations for performances, lectures, and workshops. Based with a graceful bearing and command on technical virtuosity, bhava, expressions, and tal, that's rhythm, Parvati Ram's performances have been greatly appreciated by conjurers within and outside the country. She has many dance compositions and productions to her credit. She has traveled extensively for her performances and workshops to over 30 nations, to name a few: Hungary, Australia, Myanmar, Brazil, UK, France, South Africa, and so on. She's a recipient of many awards and recognitions like Padma Shri Satyanarayan Musicology Award, Marathwada Ratna, Nritya Bhushan, UNESCO Cultural Award, Kala Ratna, Savitri Bai Phule Samman, Jeevan Gaurav Lifetime Achievement Award, etc. She pioneered and presented specially curated concerts at heritage monuments around Aurangabad, a first of its kind concept and initiative since the independence of India. A film named as Vaikhari, produced by Prasar Bharati PSBT, revolves around her creative explorations with rhythm and utterances that has been screened in many national and international film festivals. She has been featured in a BBC documentary titled East Meets West and a film on Daulatbad Devgiri Fort by Doordarshan, for which she performed her research composition in Rag Devgari Bilawal. Today, as Professor Datta shares her insights into Indian knowledge system, let us draw from her inspiration from a profound journey marked by deep-rooted tradition, scholarly rigor, and an ever-evolving artistic vision. It is with great admiration and anticipation that I now invite Professor Parvati Datta to take over the session and address the participants. Over to you, ma'am.
Namaste, good morning, everyone. It's truly an honor and a blessing to be here in this beautiful setting, looking at the great, glorious traditions of our own country, Indian traditions, Indian knowledge systems. I am honored and grateful to be a part of this journey with many academicians, educators present today in this online session. My gratitude to Dr. Madhuri Sawantji, who has kindly invited me to share some of the perspectives related to Indic learning. And I look forward to a very, very fruitful, enriching session with all the participants here. I have been a dance artist, a performing artist, and in contradiction to the kind of misconception that many Bharatiya Indians have about performing artists, is that they probably feel that dance is a practical art and so it doesn't revolve around any knowledge. So, to begin with, I would offer a kind of perspective to everyone to also look into this kind of a great legacy that has not just originated in India but has lit many nationalities and cultures across the world over the past so many centuries. India has been a world leader in that manner with respect to culture and cultural traditions. Having traveled in some of the countries in Asia and other continents, I learned that there are threads of Indian knowledge in so many countries, in so many cultures, and that has been now blended and adapted as part of their own national culture. So it is all the more important for artists and cultural seekers to come forward and take this narrative and this discourse around the concept of Indic learning. So I'll just share my screen and take you through some of the concepts that I felt would be interesting for the participants today. Can the screen be seen?
Yes, ma'am. It was there. Now we can't see that. Yeah, we can see, ma'am.
All right, all right. Thank you. So as you can see, um there is an image. I purposely chose this image because this is a conventional image of what is our idea of Indic learning, of how India would have been, and how there would have been a kind of learning system. But apart from that, there has been much more that we may not be aware of or we may have not explored it. As you can see, all the individuals in this image are men. So there has always been a kind of skewed vision with respect to Indic learning that probably women were not learning, which is not correct. We've had many women rishis and scholars and authorities. And in any case, knowledge is gender neutral. So let me take you to the theme of today's talk that I have chosen, four quadrants of Indic learning. This is something that I felt becomes the foundation of why we are trying to look at Indian knowledge systems today. So, what is this Indic learning? To begin with, what is Indic? Indic can be anything that is related to the Indian subcontinent. It is not essentially the political boundary of India, but it is about the entire, I would say, the Bharat Khanda, the greater India or the Vrihattar Bharat, which includes the entire subcontinent and also various languages and the corpus of knowledge that is around this kind of collective cultural consciousness. And an alarming thing with which I felt I can begin my talk today is about Martin Luther King, who expressed his concern when he looked at the scientific development. Many a times we have often looked at sciences as something which can be equated with the idea of development of the society. Uh, Maybe about the scientific inventions, because with science there are two pathways, one is towards discoveries and one is towards inventions. So scientific inventions have certainly created technologies and comfort and facilities for uh, inhabitants of this world to make the life more simpler and beautiful. So he says that our scientific power has outrun our spiritual power. We have guided missiles and misguided men. This was his concern. And while looking into many thoughts of the thinkers, I suddenly felt his concern as to what we are trying to think of scientific power. The power of science is limitless and it is grand and it is overwhelming, it is profound too. At the same time, can there be a balance between the two? So that was the beginning point with which I felt I can begin today's discussion on Indic learning. Some of the Western thinkers, how they have thought of society, of humanities, of existence, of coexistence, and about the idea of development. So we have often looked at individual and family as a unit, and then the bigger circle is the neighborhood and work groups. Then, of course, the organizations, different congregations, larger groups, and then institutions that will have a more structure and a more formal definition, and then across different geographical strata. Background, let us look at Indic learning. So, Indic learning will essentially have the following features: holistic approach, I would call it Samagra Drishtikon, because it is something related to the idea of including everything while learning. So, when we are learning one subject or one stream, we are not isolating ourselves from the other streams. Rather, we are all the time dwelling and discovering the resonances of the chosen stream in other streams. So, this kind of approach has been one of the key features of Indic learning. And then the experiential learning, where the learner not just learns through the teacher or through a system, but learns through experience. That experience can be guided experience, or it can be through observation, through contemplation, through reflection, and it can be, if it is a practical stream, through theoretical contemplation or theoretical references, textual references, or if it is a textual study, through observations and individual experiences. So these are things that were some of the core strengths of Indic learning. Then the Guru Shishya Parampara. We have kept this parampara not in all the streams now in the present day, but interestingly, with Indian dance and music traditions, we find that still the system of knowledge transmission has largely revolved around the Guru Shishya Parampara. So, this is essentially a pedagogical design. It can be viewed as a religious or philosophical or a spiritual tradition too, but essentially it is a pedagogical structure where there is individual attention being given to every learner, and there is a kind of personalized, customized way of preaching and guiding the learner. Then we come to a rich collection of subjects. different kinds of subjects and perceived very, very differently. For example, mathematics. Today, in today's education system, we consider mathematics as a science subject. But you would be surprised that mathematics in the Indic concept, in the Indic perspective, was understood as an art. I'll come to that little later, why it is an art. But this is how there was a different kind of perspective and a rich array of subjects. Then the multidimensionality and the interconnectedness amongst them. As I mentioned, that most of the subjects would not be learned and understood in isolation, but would be considered as a subunit of a larger knowledge ecosystem. At the same time, one of the most important things was to focus on ethics and values. So knowledge is not information, it is not a tool for just for survival and professional growth, but it is a way to evolve as a human being, for which ethics and values were essentially very, very important. And integration of theory and practice. Even today, we have followed this path of integrating theory and practice together. But let me also explain in the next few minutes as to what it meant by theory and practice with respect to the Indic learning system. It was not essentially um, learning about theoretical um, principle and then doing an experiment to prove it, like how we would usually do in today's science classes, in a physics class or in a chemistry class. And similarly, if we are to learn yoga, we would learn about the Ashtanga yoga, about the theoretical principles related to that. So, this kind of approach is again separating theory from practice. But with Indic learning, it was all integrated. Then a larger space for the tradition, innovation, and adaptability. What are these three terms? Tradition, we would largely understand what is tradition, but in this context, tradition would also be carrying forward the mindset with which one is learning. So, learning the content, learning the principles, learning the skill would be one aspect of it. But to learn and absorb the mindset, the approach, the philosophy, the essence of what we are learning, and then taking it further, making it one of the vision and mission of the life, and so remaining a custodian, carrier, and representative of the stream, so that the parampara is followed. It is taken forward to the next generation. That is the meaning of parampara. Innovation is not just about inventing something or creating a diagrammatic model or a kind of new image or representation of it, but it is also about um, thinking afresh about what we may have learned earlier and applying creativity into it. At the same time, we may have observed that India has um, remained a very adaptive nation, an adaptive cultural entity with so many cultures, so many traditions, so many political dynasties, and so many kinds of patronages, different kinds of rulers, different systems of governance. There has been a kind of adaptability. So this has been one of the core strengths of Indic learning system about adaptability. And last but not the least is the sustainability. Whatever is learned, understood, realized, can it be furthered in a way that completes the circle? a kind of fulfillment, a kind of completeness, and a kind of preservation, conservation within itself, within the ecosystem. So, this was one of the very important visions of Indic learning. This is something that I would like to offer to all the participants to take a look at the quadrants of Indic learning. As you can see, on one side is Vidya, then Kala, Sadhana, and Shilpa. We are all familiar with these terms, and we are aware that we often interchange the words, and we commonly use Vidya as anything that is knowledge, Kala as anything that is creative, Sadhana anything related to practice, and Shilpa we have minimized or reduced its scope by connecting it only with the crafts. So let me elaborate on all the four. Vidya is about any kind of learning. It can be theoretical, it can be conceptual understanding, and it encompasses learning of texts, scriptures, historical knowledge, but it is also about deep thinking, reasoning, finding the truth, deeper understanding, and validated knowledge, meaning something that is proven, something that has passed the test of time and is not untrue, is not subjective. It is something that is objective. That is Vidya. Then Kala. Kala, all the creative pursuits, but essentially, Kala involves a kind of artistic expression, innovation, and it also includes, now this is important, it includes the ability to improvise, interpret, and create new works. This is the zone of problem solving. This is the zone of individual talent and individual capability. Then Shilpa. Shilpa is the skills, the crafts, all that can be done by the human body, the physical skill that you can use your body, you can use a tool, and you can create something. Usually it is related to the tangible, not the abstract. Sadhana is immersive practice, dedicated, repetitive practice, and the idea is to deepen understanding and refine the skills. And this is the path through which an individual can master a particular skill, a creative art, or a knowledge. For all the three, you would require sadhana. Looking at Vidya, we may not find a very accurate term to represent Vidya in English. We have often tried to translate the word Vidya as knowledge, which we may continue doing because since English is a younger language compared to Sanskrit, we may not be able to find similar expressions in that language, probably because we are aware that every language has emerged from a particular cultural context, and that's how the vocabulary was built. That is probably one of the reasons that we come across more than 1,000 Indian words in the English dictionary, because it was always felt by the Britishers that there are few expressions that are not appropriately, accurately translated into English, and somehow the essence is lost. So, we may have to agree that Vidya may be partially translated as knowledge into English, but there is a kind of uh, there is a kind of expression in Greek language called gnosis. This word looks at a more appropriate, accurate equivalent of Vidya. Gnosis is an accepted term in English vocabulary also. So we may, in the academic discourse, try to use the term gnosis whenever we refer to Vidya. And in the common narratives, we may continue using knowledge. There is a similar term in Sanskrit called Gyan. Gyan is not Vidya. I have often discussed this with my students, and I have also quizzed and remained curious about it that what is the difference between Vidya and Gyan? So, Gyan is like a doctrine, it is something that may have reached a level of systematized, structured principle. It has now become a theoretical principle. It's a kind of a sutra now. So when it has reached that level of processing and refinement, and it has also been revealed and realized by the learner, then it becomes gyan. In the Shaiva tradition, there are different expressions related to the idea of Vidya. They have conventionally divided the means of liberation, which is taught in the agamas, and the subject matter is divided into four categories. So that is kriya, which is the ritual. Over here, it is all the kind of acts, physical acts that are symbolically offered. The doctrine or gnosis, as we said, gyan or vidya, and then the meditation, which is yoga, and charya. Charya is the ascetic observance and different kinds of rules that are observed as part of the conduct of the learner and the learned, both the teacher and the disciple both. In the Shakta tradition, Vidya is one of the deities. Interestingly, in the ancient philosophical, religious traditions, there were deities that represented different human qualities or endeavors, and so Vidya was one of the deities. The famous Saundarya Lahari by Shankaracharya gives a vivid description of Vidya. And he says, he talks about the 360 rays of radiance of knowledge emanated from the six Adhara chakras, and then from the 52 rays of Swadhisthana chakra and 56 chakras, 56 rays of Mooladhar. These form the Rudra Granthi, and this is the seat of knowledge. This is the beginning, and this is where Vidya is. This is the beginning. In the Buddhist tradition, there are Panchavidyas. This reminds us about the glorious, great legacy of Indian knowledge system when we had the Indian universities during the Buddhist period. And there we see that the five kinds of Vidya have a different classification. The science of language, Shabda Vidya; logic, Hetu Vidya; medicine, Chikitsa Vidya; and then the fine arts and crafts, so Shilpa Karma Sthana Vidya; and then the inner science, spirituality. And this is the Adhyatma Vidya, which can be studied later on through observation and refinement. Later on, it was compiled in the Tripitak. What do we understand from Vidya now? Vidya is actually something, a kind of knowledge which deals with every aspect of life, with expression, with creative expression and communication. There has to be a kind of Vidya which is about the Shabd, the language. Language for communication, expression, creative expression, and as a symbol, as a metaphor. Similarly, logic. There are many such questions. Some are about the mortal world, but there are many questions and curious paths related to the divine, the, I would say, beyond human, mundane, and the universal principles. And one may want to take that path and delve into it and think about it. Similarly, medicine, and then the creative path, which is through the arts. Nyaya is one of the philosophical paths which takes us to the idea of buddhi, which is the intellect, the power of thinking, the method of thinking, how the mind works. And there we have two classifications, vidya and avidya. This is interesting because when there is vidya, there is valid knowledge, there is also invalid knowledge, which is avidya. And in another philosophical system, Vaisheshika, the invalid vidya is then classified into four kinds: Sanshaya, Viparyaya, Anadhyavasaya, and Swapna. These are all about some kind of associations of the mind and impressions of the mind. And these are not valid knowledge. Vaisheshika gives the four valid knowledge also, four kinds of valid knowledge. So it is pratyaksha. Pratyaksha gyan is something that is direct. You have realized it, experienced it through the physical senses. And there again, there is a subcategory of manasa and bahya. So psychologically you've experienced, and bahya is externally what you've experienced. Then inference is anuman. Anuman is indirect knowledge which is derived from observing any symbol, any sign. Like in the medical principle, sometimes there is a symbol, there is a symptom, and so on. Similarly, in philosophy, in psychology, many things. Then recollection, smriti. This is based on knowledge that is already stored in the memory through some kind of past perception. Then supernormal occult perception. What is this? It is called Jnana Pratyaksha. This is something the yogis are capable of doing. Through their yogic meditative powers, they are able to transcend the realities and perceive something beyond the physical senses and use intuition and some kind of other supernormal cognitive power to attain and understand a particular kind of knowledge. Now, this is not about superstition, this is not about any cultural context. We've often seen and examined how great scientists were able to arrive at a particular observation and they were able to prove it. Many a times it began from something that occurred in the intuition. Could it be like this? Why is this happening? Could it be like that? And so, with that kind of thinking and association, the scientists were able to arrive at a particular kind of reference or a theory or a principle or a natural phenomenon which they started testing, and later on it was proven. So, interestingly, we have this kind of scope of different kinds of valid knowledge in Vaisheshika. So, knowledge or vidya, if we would say, vidya is essentially a science. It is something to do with learning, scholarship, philosophy. According to some sources, the four vidyas are also given in this way: Trayi, Anvishiki, then Dandaniti, and Varta. As you can see, Trayi is about all the Vedic knowledge. Then we have Anvishiki. The word in itself talks about exploration. So everything that is about experience, exploration, experimentation, all that will come in the second category. Third is Dandaniti. It is something related to today's management sciences, administration, the science of governance. and Varta, the practical arts about all the occupational streams, including agriculture, commerce, medicine, etc. In Manusmriti, we find a fifth science also, fifth Vidya also. It is the Atma Vidya. It is the knowledge of soul and spiritual truth. So here we see that Vidya was granted this kind of a vast scope as per the desire and seeking of a learner. The Vidya can be chosen, the path can be chosen accordingly. So here let me give you the etymological source of the word Vidya. It comes from the root word vid, which means to reason upon, and then it also would mean finding, inquiring, knowing, understanding something. So we understand that Vidya was not just about a kind of talent or skill or just knowledge. It is something that is a continuous process of learning, of acquiring something, testing it, observing it, deeper understanding, and also sacred. Vidya gets a kind of structure, a kind of classification as the 14 divisions, in which there are the four Vedas: Rig Ved, Yajurved, Samaved, Atharvaved. Then the six Vedangas, which is Shiksha, Vyakaran, Chanda, Nirukta, Jyotisha, Kalpa. The 18 Puranas, two Mimamsa, then Nyaya Shastra and Dharma Shastra. There is also a school of thought that talks about the 18 Vidyas, the Ashtadasha Vidyasthana, which includes the four Vedas, six Vedangas, four Upangas, and four Upavedas. So the four Upangas are Mimamsa, Nyaya Shastra, Purana, and Dharma Shastra. So Dharma Shastra, because for Vidya it was important to always consider ethical moral code also. There is a kind of responsibility of every learner towards the society, towards the ecosystem, and so Dharma Shastra remained an important component of the Vidya. Now, to better understand what are these 14 Vidyas, the Chaturdasha Vidyasthana, we know about the four Vedas. Now the Upavedas: Artha Shastra, Dhanur Veda, Gandharva Veda, and Ayurveda. Vedanga includes Shiksha, which is the science of phonetics and phonology. Kalpa is the rituals, but rituals we should not just limit it to today's puja offerings. Rituals is much more than that, because why it is a science, we have to understand that there has to be a kind of tested principles and system to it. Vyakaran is grammar. Nirukta is about the science of etymology. Chanda, the metrics and poetics. And Jyotishi is cosmogony and astrology. Now one may wonder that why is it a science? Why it is a science? Because in today's education system we have not considered it as a science. The very reason is that how I have defined Vidya is about deep understanding, about systematic examination, and about a logic in learning and understanding it. And it is essentially not subjective but objective, and it has been reasoned, examined, tested, and that's how it is a valid knowledge. With phonetics and phonology, why it was important is because this looks at the Indian languages. Even today, all Indian languages are largely dependent on the kind of pronunciation that we do. So the way we spell it, the way we utter it, the meaning changes. If I just write Kala in English, it can be spelled as color or kala or kala or kala. And we know that all the four words will have four different meanings. So phonetics and phonology was important. Grammar, because in most of the Indian languages and especially Sanskrit, the expression is so accurate that the grammarian has to be very perfect in the way you are articulating what you are explaining, because later on it is going to be a theoretical principle, and so it should not be misinterpreted. So that was the vision of the knowledge system, that it will always remain valid because it will not be misinterpreted, it will not be misunderstood. And so, to be able to make it as accurate as possible, it has to be refined through the lens of Vyakarana. Nirukta, why Nirukta is important, why it is a science, is because there is a logic, there is a system how every word is created. And the word becomes representative of an expression. As I said, Vidya is derived from Vid Dhatu, which means to know. So that's how the word has been created. Every word finds a different kind of representation, and that's how it will again not be misunderstood if we follow the path of Nirukta. So, if we have any theoretical principle and if we are well versed in etymology, in Shiksha, and in Vyakarana and Chanda, we may be able to exactly decode the meaning of the principle very well. And that's the kind of derived knowledge that we may acquire after learning it. Looking at Jyotisha, why was Jyotisha part of a science? Is even today we have astronomy, we have astrophysics, and all this was part of Jyotisha. Looking at the cosmic principles, looking at the astronomical distances, the different planetary motions, different happenings and events in the cosmos, in the large universe, all that was always a matter of interest and scientific inquiry for the ancestors. So, this is the Chaturdasha Vidyasthana. Then the Vedas. Look at the Vedas. In Vedas, we have Rig Veda, the oldest of the Vedas, then which is a collection of the hymns and dedicated to different deities. Now today we are all in the 21st century, and I have remained a student of science, and I have also questioned a number of times as a young learner, that is Vedas about some kind of religious and spiritual path only. But over years of inquiry and examination, I have also been able to rediscover the Vedas and understand it as as a collection of wisdom by seers, thinkers, thinkers who were not just observing but were also able to process what they observed, and they were able to understand the entire cosmic creation as an ecosystem. And that's why the deities that we find in the Vedas are actually water, fire, wind, sun, moon, and so on. So these are like the cosmic energies. Then Yajurveda is about the kind of instructions that we may want to follow to symbolically connect with these cosmic principles. Samaveda is about the creative part now. So all the verses from usually from the Rig Vedas, when they are to be presented, they should be presented in a more melodic and artistic way. And Samaveda deals with that. Atharva Veda is about all the healing, well-being, and all the kind of coexistence that we may have with the nature around us. Now, every Veda, this is the structure, every Veda has four subsections: the Samhitas, Brahmanas, Aranyakas, and Upanishads. Samhita is all the collection of the hymns, the prayers, while Brahmanas are the rituals and procedures. Brahmana is not the, uh, although the word is sounding similar, but it is not part of the Chaturvarna or the four castes that we have today, commonly in our common conversation about Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. This is not that. It's about looking at the universal principles. So, Brahma symbolizes the universality of knowledge, and that's how the word was created using etymology. Aranyaka, as you can understand from the term itself, Aranya is forest. So, Aranyaka is gaining insights, living and observing the nature, the forest. Maybe there is a time when you learn and then you start traveling. When you start traveling, that is the time there are newer revelations based on what we may have learned. So, all this is the Aranyaka. And Upanishad. Upanishad is the learning part. Why it is the learning part is because Upanishad means sitting close by, sitting nearby. Upanishad, पास में बैठना. किसके पास में बैठना? So sitting next to the Acharya, next to the Guru. So this is where the knowledge is processed, simplified, and explained so that it is understood, assimilated, and then passed on to the next generation. This was the vision of Vedas. So, understanding, reflecting, absorbing, realizing, awakening, and sharing and teaching too. So, I'm just giving you some examples from each Veda. You would see the Gayatri mantra, which is actually the Savitri mantra, but it is set to Gayatri meter, and so it is commonly called the Gayatri mantra, which is from the Rig Veda, and it is a prayer to Savitar, which is the sun god. Then Yajurveda, the most famous, one of the most famous verses, Sahana Bhavatu, Sahanau Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karvavahe, Tejasvinavadhitamastu, Ma Vidvishavahe. So this is about the teacher and disciple learning together. Let us protect and carry forward the knowledge, and let us together work and realize. Let our learning be brilliant and purposeful. And Samaveda, which revolves around the melodic chants. There are interesting offerings that are musically rendered, and I'm giving you one of the examples from one of the verses from Samaveda, which is about Agni. And look at the kind of communication that we find in the Vedas. There is a verse addressing the fire, and there would be verses addressing the Surya, sun god. So what is this? This is actually observing deeply the natural forces, the cosmic forces, and trying to, as a subset, as a unit of this cosmic creation, trying to connect with all the principles, all the creative principles. Atharva Veda, Ayurveda, and the astrophysics, astrology, all these streams actually are originated from the Atharva Veda. It takes us to different level of understanding health, healing, and well-being. So here there is something about life, about how there can be brilliance in the way you live. Upavedas. The four Upavedas, as I mentioned. Ayurveda, interestingly, I've often shared this when I talk about Ayurveda, is in today's discourse, we feel that Ayurveda is about the Indian version of medical science, which is partially true, but the word Ayurveda, now I'm taking you to Nirukta, which is the science of etymology. Let us look at this word. Let us examine it. So, Ayurveda is a word created from Ayu and Veda. Veda is knowledge and Ayu is life. So, it is the science of life. That is what it means. So, it pays a lot of attention to preventive healthcare too. There are elaborations on Ritucharya, Dinicharya, on surgery, as you would know in the Sushrut Samhita, and about medicinal plants, medicinal metals, and how general medicine, how the Chikitsa Shastra, how to treat children, Bala Chikitsa, and so on. Then Dhanurveda. Though the word Dhanurveda comes from Dhanu meaning bow and Veda is the science, but it is about the science of warfare. It is about the military science. This is the study that includes creating, designing, assembling, operating different kinds of weapon, about military ethics, about strategies, about governance, and about martial arts too. When you can be in the self defensive mode without using a tool or weapon. So, this was essentially, we would know that all the rishis, both the bhikkhus, they all were well versed in one or the other martial art. This was one of the essential vidyas that everyone would learn while learning any of their chosen area of study. Then Gandharva Veda is the science of music and arts. Now, this is very interesting that music and dance, drama, all these streams were considered a science. Why a science? Because it requires reasoning, deep thinking, understanding, reflecting, testing, and validating it. And so it was a science. And then later on, we come across Bharat Muni's Natya Shastra, which is nothing but the Panchama Veda, the fifth Veda, which was created for the common people, for all the mortals who may not engage um, in a kind of system in the Gurukul and only learning, researching, and finding the truth, but may also want to engage in a recreational path by learning and reflecting on what they had understood. Atharva Veda, Artha Shastra, is from it is also called Artha Veda, and this is the science of economics and governance. Economics played an important role, and it is not just commerce and trade or finance. It is about the tangible and intangible aspects of economy. The tangible aspect remaining as taxation, administration, and different kinds of dealings with treasury. But there was the intangible aspect of it also, which takes us to the idea of the chatur purusharthas, the four purusharthas: dharma, artha, kama, moksha. So how we would regulate our trade activities and wealth management and ethical business practices. What is the purpose of what we are doing? Is it about the well-being of the community, or is it about only my own development? So, Arthashastra essentially had this kind of component, and it includes different other things also about military strategy, about the kind of financial policies, the Danda Niti, which is about how to punish the criminally inclined, and what should be the duties of a king, because the king also should be bound by some guidelines. All this was part of the Artha Veda or Artha Shastra. Then the six auxiliary disciplines within the Vidya: Shiksha, Vyakarana, Chanda. Shiksha, as I mentioned, the science of phonetics. We have many works on Shiksha, like the Paniniya Shiksha, Naradi Shiksha, then Yajnavalkya Shiksha, and so on. With Vyakaran, the most important has been Ashtadhyayi by Panini, and there is also a Mahabhashya by Patanjali. Uh, and Vyakaran essentially is about the deeper study of grammar. Why Chanda is important is because there is a metaphorical, symbolic way of expressing what we know. And so the ancient seers and the knowledgeable people would like to design it while expressing. Many of the knowledge based verses you would find are not in the prose form but in the poetic form. Why is it so? Today we would not engage in that. You would not find a scientific principle being expressed in the form of a poetry. One may want to do it, but usually in your textbooks you may not come across a poetic expression of law of gravity or something else, because we have not included creativity in the exchange or transmission of scientific knowledge. But look at the interesting aspect of Indic knowledge system, that we did include Chanda as one of the important sciences, the science of poetic meters and prosody, which is governed by different rhythmic structures. There are different mantras set to different meters, like the Gayatri mantra, as I said, is actually the Gayatri Chanda. It is Savitri mantra set to Gayatri Chanda. We have Anushtup Chanda, Trishtup Chanda, and so on. Nirukta, the science of etymology. There is an important work which is Nirukta by Yaska, and there is a commentary by Nighantu, which is one of the most authoritative texts on Nirukta. It is still followed even today. Researchers like me and many other yeah, followers of Indic studies, whenever we come across a text and we want to understand the deeper meaning of what has been written in this text, we have to we have to follow the path of Nirukta, and we have to refer to a text on Nirukta. That's the method of understanding the deeper meaning of the verses that have been mentioned. Here, I would also like to specify that most of the theoretical principles in the ancient Shastras have been condensed and written in the form of a sutra. So the sutra is almost like a codified expression. It is just like a mathematical expression. So one has to know the principle, one has to know the system to be able to decode and understand what has been mentioned there. And that's where Nirukta is essential and very important aspect of Indic learning. Jyotisha, the science of astronomy and astrology, used to determine also auspicious timings, but as I said earlier, also to understand all the celestial bodies, the cosmic principles, the cosmic movement, and many other things that remain an important area of curiosity even today for the modern day scientists. Kalpa. Kalpa, in a very small way, we have still remained adherent to that, but we have unknowingly placed Kalpa in our religious traditions, and we have not attempted looking at Kalpa as a science. But there are possibilities to again review and look at Kalpa from that perspective, about sacred geometry, about different Guhya Sutras, the domestic rituals, the public rituals, the Dharma Sutras, and so on. All this was very much part of Kalpa. So, Kalpa is a very symbolic, codified way of looking at what we do as part of our offerings and ritual procedures. So here to sum up, Vidya, which can mean science, learning, knowledge, and scholarship. Valid knowledge, which cannot be contradicted. So as I said, valid knowledge is something that is proven. Any factual knowledge that cannot be disputed or refuted. It is true knowledge, intuitively gained knowledge of the self. It can also be that, about self-realization. And it is not mere intellectual knowledge. This is something very important when we discuss about Vidya. It essentially requires deep understanding. And Gyan draws after the completion and perfection of being through the Vidyas. And then one crosses over beyond birth and death, having already destroyed the bonds of birth. So that is one of the paths of Vidya. that one is able to surpass the mortal identity and mortal existence and engage in the path of knowledge. What is kala then? Kala, interestingly, is derived from a root word color, which means to count, to make. But there is another meaning also to it. It is to destroy. You would come across Sanskrit verb kalayati. So it is to reduce or to finish or to destroy. That is also one of the meanings. But here, color also means to design, to delve into practice of innovation. It also means a digit of the moon. We say Chandra Kala, or anything that is the 1/16th part of something. That will also mean Kala. So now you can understand that why in Sanskrit it is important to look at Nirukta, it is important to look at grammar, is because one word may have many meanings, and then that's the interesting part, because all the meanings are not the same, or but they do have a kind of, every word has a kind of resonance, so all the other meanings may also in a way enrich or reinforce this particular meaning that we may be applying to in a particular context. So here, for our common understanding, we are going by the meaning of kala as an art, essentially a physical or mechanical art, a skill and ingenuity. So it is essentially a human process that includes stages of perception, cognition, inspiration, acquisition, and its application of a skill form. So now, why kala is not art? Usually we do think that these words are interchangeable. We do want to say, I want to introduce myself as an artist, but in Hindi or Marathi, I would say मैं कलाकार हूँ. So in a common narrative, we do think that these two words would mean the same, but they are not, because um, looking at some of the research by scholars, art will not be able to represent the entire scope of meaning of the word Sanskrit word kala. There is another Greek word here for kala, and that is techne. This is supposed to be the closest word that can represent the word, the Sanskrit word kala, because techne is both art and technology. But what is technology over here is like building or creating something. It is about the skill of creating something, because as I said in the beginning, it is about a human process. In Buddhism, we come across 64 kalas having its roots in the four Vedas. It is mentioned in the Mahapragya Paramita Shastra. And there we see that these are the these are the aspects of kala that have been mentioned. One is creativity, which implies giving life or breath to something. So, for example, you have a piece of paper and you paint something. So, you've given a life to it. Or you have the human body, but you start dancing. So, there is a different beauty that has taken life through the body. So, this is like infusing prana into something. And then kala is also part of time. It is a measure of time. Even in Natya Shastra, it talks about a kind of time. It is not the clock bound time, but it is a time that is around nature or about the human sensibilities. And kala can also mean a virtue, a skill, and a type of recreation. So here we come across different categories, classifications of the 64 kalas. The 64 kalas can be classified as, there can be a basket for the Lalita Kala, then the Kaushala Kala and Upayukta Kala. I find it very interesting because Lalita Kala is all the, we have still continued using this term fine arts in our university discourses also. So what is fine art? Basically, it is about any art that has been refined and that is being refined for aesthetic pleasure, pure aesthetic pleasure. That is the purpose of such art forms. So all kinds of music, dance, theater, painting, sculpture, etc. can be fine art when the purpose is pure aesthetic pleasure and it has been refined. So when it has been refined, there is a kind of novelty in it, and this novelty is Lalita. So that is Lalita Kala. What is Kaushal Kala then? Kaushal is about some kind of skill, artistic skill, that can also be a means of livelihood. So here there is a commercial component to it. I don't want to say that Lalit Kala is not commercial or is not about commercial engagement. It can be, it is. But that is not the main purpose. The main purpose is refinement and taking the art to the next level. But here, there are simple, interesting skills that can be artistically executed, and that can not just be a utility or an interesting thing to watch or appreciate, but it is also can be a means of livelihood, like the basket weaving, tailoring, jewelry making, and so on. So all this is the Kaushala Kalas. Then there are Upayukta Kalas. These are utilitarian, essentially utilitarian, like building, homes, construction, architecture, carpentry, tailoring, and so on. So the 64 kalas can be categorized like that. Some of the kalas are Lalita Kala, some are Kaushala Kala, some are Upayukta Kala. Similarly, there is another kind of classification that we come across. That is the Vijnana Kala, the scientific arts. The Lalita Kala, as I said, and Kaushala Kala put together, so like the fine arts and crafts together. The Vanijya Kala, meaning the commercial arts, that which are about commercial activities. The Vinoda Kala is recreation, all kinds of entertainment like the stand-up comedy, mimicry, circus, and so on. All these can be Vinoda Kala because people enjoy, they get thrilled, they get entertained when they see it. Then Sankirna Kala are all the miscellaneous and complex ones that include one or two more elements also. So this is also one of the classification. I think it is very useful because in today's times when we are trying to put all the kalas, all the art forms in one basket, then we have a difficulty understanding those and then dealing with those. So many a times as a dance practitioners, I have experienced that people think, oh, if you are learning dance, what is the utility? But we have to explain that dance is not a utility. It is a Lalita Kala. For utility, you have the Upayogita Kalas. So you may want to learn basket weaving and then you may want to do it commercially and you can earn a livelihood out of it, because when you are thinking, you are aiming that you want to learn a kala to earn a livelihood, then the aim is different. When the aim is I want to have a creative expression and I like doing that and I want to learn it and let that be my career, then it is a different thing. Then one can continue doing the Lalita Kala and perfect it to the level that one is able to earn a living out of it. That's interesting. So here I am giving you the 64 kalas. You can see Geeta Vidya. See, now it is written as a Vidya because when we are writing about kalas, we are not saying that it is not Vidya. It is also a Vidya because we know it is part of the Gandharva Vidya, Gandharva Ved. So Vadya Vidya, Nritya Vidya, Natya Vidya, Alekhya Vidya is the Chitrakala. The different varieties of kalas, creative pursuits. And as I said, that it is essentially about the human endeavor. It is about the human capacities. It is about the human talent and capability. So how well you can create something, how you can create a kind of accessory, many things like this. Even how you can create a puzzle and solve it. So you have Prahelika. Then how interestingly you can read a book is the Pustak Vachan, and so on. So you will see that there are so many multi people with different kind of unique talents can render their talents in the form of different kalas. There is also a kala of remaining multilingual, like if you are able to speak many languages one after the other. That's also a talent. So, art essentially, kala essentially deals with talent. And the last ones are the ones that I really appreciate. The Vainayaki Kala is something about governance, the ability to govern and demand respect and obedience from people. That in itself is a kala because it is about the human talent. One may learn management studies, but one may not be a good management person, manager, or one may learn administration, the theory and practice of administration, but when he or she is appointed as the head of an institution or an organization, one may not have that administrative qualities. We often discuss about all this. So, because this idea of administration is after all a kala, a talent. Similarly, Vajayiki Vidya. So it is about winning something. How you are going to remain consistent, creative, and you are going to lead yourself towards that sense of accomplishment, fulfillment of the goal. Whatever you have endeavored to do, you have finally reached the point where you have been able to complete it. And then about learning, about the seva to the guru. So that is the Vaitaliki Vidya. So moving forward, we find reference of the 64 kalas learned by Sri Krishna. I think some of you may know that Sri Krishna formally learned in a Gurukul. He went to the Sandipani ashram and he learned the 64 kalas and the 14 vidyas. So these are the 64 kalas that he learned. And out of the 64 kalas, you will see the Chaur kala, the Chaur karma, and that is why we are often we often have these narrative of why Krishna ji would do the Makhan Chori. So doing it as a fun, doing it with talent, creativity, and in a loving way can be a kala, not in the criminal way. That is what it should mean. So here I am sharing an image of the 64 kalas. This is a Patachitra painting, a traditional style of painting from Odisha, where you would see that all the 64 kalas have been drawn, painted by the village artists of Raghurajpur, which is a village in Puri district of Odisha. Shilpa, all the practical arts and crafts, including Shilpa Shastra, sculpture, iconography, architecture, and other related skills. So, Shilpa is all kinds of arts, creative things that one can do using the hand, using the feet, using the body, and using your own imagination. Sadhana. Sadhana is an important quadrant of Indic learning because it is about the dedicated repetitive practice, a kind of method. It's not just practicing whatever you know, just the way you feel. In today's times, I come across many learners who say, नहीं हम घर में ही कर लेंगे, I can practice at home, I can do this, I can. No, it needs some kind of system. You have to know the system. So that is the first level of sadhana, but that's not everything. Sadhana can take us to different levels of revelation and realization. In Yoga Sutra, Patanjali talks about abhyas and kriya. So abhyas is practice, repeating it again and the kriya, the action related to that. And then there are these three areas. One is tapas, which requires a disciplined way of practicing. And then swadhyaya is essential because it's not like mugging up something what you know, and that cannot be a sadhana. So sadhana would involve swadhyaya. One has to engage in self study, one has to do it every day, then only it can be a sadhana. And how to do self study, there are different ways. I'll come to that in the next lecture probably. And then Ishwar Pranidhan. Why it is important is because one has to remain motivated and interested in what one is learning and practicing. At the same time, not thinking too much about the results, because the moment we think about results, there are different kinds of negative feelings that one may encounter, like anxiety, competitiveness, jealousy, anxiousness, and anger, agitation, and maybe confidence gets fluctuated, and so on. And so it is very important, whatever we are learning, when we are doing the sadhana, we have to remain in the most positive zone of consciousness, and to understand that I have been trying my best to the best of my capacity, and whatever is offered to me is a blessing, is a gift, and I'm grateful for that. And never to claim and think that this is something that I really did it, not that kind of a boastful way of thinking, because that can help us navigate through failures and disappointments too. So, a brief review of the, the knowledge canvas of Indic learning. There are these philosophies too, and you would see that Indian philosophies are broadly divided into Astika and Nastika. One that follows the authority of Vedas, and one that are independently, there is a different kind of epistemic authority. So there are these two paths, and interestingly, they have also crossed paths. So you would see the reference of something like this in the other philosophical paths too, and that is interesting about the Indian philosophies. It's like a fabric where different threads have crossed each other and together created a rich fabric of philosophical consciousness. So within Astic philosophies is the Mimamsa and Vedanta, and then the Sankhya Yoga, Nyaya, and Vaisheshika. And for Nastika, we have the Buddhist, Jain, Charvak, Ajivika, and also Tantra. But we also have seen that Tantra is very much part of the Astika too. So here we have all kinds of cross pollination of ideas too. It's very interesting to learn about that. So, what is the current methodology? I'm coming to my own art form, but it is usually applied to music and theater and maybe even for languages. We see that how we start learning the chosen subject. So, for dance, I can say that a dance learner begins with the shilpa, meaning the skill of dancing, the physical skill of dancing. And little later, he or she is introduced to the creative component through by learning few compositions, by doing something in a very creative way, through performances and so on. And that is the time one is also interested to learn about different underlying principles, philosophies, and the background of it. And also the developing the right kind of mindset to be able to analyze, examine, and interpret what they have been performing. And all this gets reinforced through the sadhana, through the practice. Without practice, one doesn't know how to proceed with this. I can see a similar path in medicine too, because medical science is also a practice led science, practice led stream of education. So there has to be the practice of it, there has to be examination, and all the time there has to be a reflection on all these aspects. So, quickly into Sankhya, which is about dualism, looking at Purusha and Prakriti. The Yoga again talks about Purusha and Prakriti, but here we have the Jiva who becomes the channel and the medium for this kind of sadhana. Then, when we talked about Vidya, the sciences, we also felt that what is the valid knowledge, how to think of valid knowledge, and how to validate it. So, in the Indic system, we have these terms. These are very interesting to observe. The means of valid knowledge. So, the Pratyaksha, Anuman, Upaman, Arthapatti, and then anupalabdhi and shabda. So, different ways of validating it. There is a text of the uh, 9th century BC to the 6th century. Around that, it was written Aranyaka, one of the Aranyakas, Taittiriya Aranyaka, where we see that Smriti, Pratyaksha, Aitihya, and Anumana, these are the ways of testing whether the knowledge is correct or not. So this is what it this is how it becomes a science, because we are constantly using some tools of validating, testing, examining, and proving it. Um about the Purusharthas, because when we talked about the Artha Shastra, the Artha Veda, we did mention about the four Purusharthas. This is the one of the foundational concepts of Indic learning, because of the four fundamental goals that every individual may aspire to develop, and that should be the path of learning. So it is the dharma, which is the ethical code. Prosperity is artha, kama, and moksha, liberation. But later on, around the medieval period, when there was Vaishnavism, there was a fifth Purushartha also that was included, is prem. It is about compassion, about empathy, about acceptance of everyone. And I think in today's times, knowledge should actually take us to this path about community building, about understanding, about coexistence and mutual respect. So, knowledge that is not man made, we have to understand. Some of it is understood by man, some of it is explored by man, and some of it is already there in the larger universe, left to be explored and understood by us. So, looking at the larger scope of knowledge, philosophy plays an important part, because it can keep the mind nourished, nurtured, and interested in examining the universe. And this is how the philosophical system have looked at the divine, the soul, the karma, nature, and the living being, and the concept of sambandha, the significance of ritualistic spiritual practices through abhidheya, and then about the guiding by the teachers, by the seekers, towards the ultimate goal of achieving not just knowledge in the material or the intellectual way, but as the final way of living through by achieving the divine love, which is the prayojana. So, all this is, it seems to be like an interwoven expression of understanding. The six darshanas, the six philosophies, the texts, Upanishads, Vedangas, Upavedas, the Itihasas, and the Tantras too, because the Tantras are about the codified symbolic way of acting, the action, and its contemporary relevance and challenge. Let me conclude with this. So, in the current times, there are different ways how we are coping with the idea of understanding the knowledge. We do face limitations at times or challenges looking at how the ethical conduct can be preserved, how the learner or the learned or the teacher can remain inspired. There are many such areas of deepening our system and our method of learning, where um, the value based foundation of Indic learning can truly guide us, take us towards newer frontiers of interconnectedness, towards the pursuit of happiness and enlightenment, realization, awakening, and leading a life with in a compassionate way. Um, the Bhagavad Puran gives a beautiful overview of what knowledge can give you. So, he says that the mature fruit of Vedic knowledge passed down through the Shukadeva Goswami in the Vaishnav text it is said. It contains a kind of immortal nectar, something that is. Now, what is this immortality? It is something that will remain beyond you, beyond our mortal life. So, that is how it can be appreciated, relished, and it can be taken further. The method of teaching and learning was essentially oral transmission, and so Shruti and Smriti. Shruti is the revealed literature, but Smriti is the understood and memorized. So, this remained the structure of the Indic learning. The philosophical traditions that I mentioned have remained a kind of tapestry for human mind to delve and look at different possibilities and approaches to testifying any kind of knowledge. And so with Sankhya there is a school of enumeration. The yoga is not just the yogic exercises that we do today. Yoga is essentially a philosophy. So it is a practice led philosophy which is about the jiva and the divine. Nyaya is about logic, a philosophy that is useful in engaging the mind towards validation of knowledge. And the Vaisheshika, as I mentioned earlier, the four kinds of avidyas and four kinds of vidyas. So there are so many ways of testifying, and all this would essentially require deep thinking, reflection, meditation on the stream that we are pursuing. There are other philosophical traditions too, apart from the ones that I mentioned. Largely the Pashupat, which is now not uh, prevalent so much, but there are scholars of Shaiva Siddhanta even today, and there is the Panini Darshana, because Panini was a linguist. So how he has looked at different principles through the lens of language. Now this is very interesting. I hope that in the current discourses on interdisciplinary education, can linguistics be one of the lenses of understanding the deeper core meaning of something. So then there is this alchemical school, which is by Raseshwar. Ajivika, which was a Shramanic movement, not prevalent today, but we do find a lot of references through other thinkers also, including the Buddha. Agyana, again a Shramanic movement. So in many Buddhist and Jain texts, we find references of these ideas. These have been how human mind continued delving into deeper areas of study and exploration and aiming at knowing the truth. The Charvak, which is also known as the Lokayata, the Brihaspati, which was the founder of the Charvak and the Lokayata philosophy, who founded the sutras on different understandings and different kinds of organized way of revealing the phenomenons. So I'm just taking you to some of the salient features of Buddhism, Jainism, and the Four Noble Truths, which came as a refined expression of the Buddhist doctrine little later in the next centuries after the Buddha. So let me again conclude with this slide with which I began, the four quadrants of Indic learning. Let us reflect on this. Let us engage in starting a fresh discourse around these four quadrants: Vidya, Kala, Shilpa, and Sadhana. Whatever we are learning and pursuing, I'm sure we would be able to place those in these quadrants and gain deeper insights related to how we would like to perfect, refine, and enhance our learning. This is one of the pathways that has been offered by the glorious Indic tradition and that may remain relevant and useful even in the modern context of education and learning. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I truly appreciate the the kind of interest which was shown to me and expressed by all the um, organizers and initiators. I hope this narrative has been useful for all the teachers and educators, participants present here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, madam. Thank you so much. You will be continuing the lecture after this, after a minute, 15 minutes break?
Yeah, we can take a break and then we can continue.
Yeah, sure. So we will meet after 15 minutes. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Can we start?
Sure, ma'am. Madhuri, ma'am. Hello, is Madhuri ma'am there? Ma'am, can we start?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Parvati ma'am, we can start with the lecture.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Can you mute there are a few participants, I think there.
Sure, ma'am, I'll just do that right away.
Coordinators, please mute everybody.
Ma'am, all are on mute now.
Namaste. So let us continue the discourse around Indic system of learning. So in my previous lecture, I spoke about the 4 quadrants of Indic learning. I will now discuss with you about the idea of a learner, a seeker, and what is the system of learning? How does it work? And we will try to look at this system through the lens of Indic learning. Is my screen visible to all?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you. So, my topic for this lecture is about the concept of learner, learned, and learning system within Indic knowledge system. Again, I would try to take you all through the journey of examining some of the terms that are related to the terms, the theoretical principles that I'm going to discuss. So to begin with, what is learning? Learning, essentially, as we would say in today's times, is the process of acquiring new understanding, knowledge, behavior, skills, values, attitudes, and preferences. It is also essentially a change in human disposition or capability that persists over a period of time and is not simply something which is related to the growth only, the processes of growth, because we know about the processes of growth could be a biological process. So this is one of the thinkers, Robert Gagne, in the present times has thought about the idea of learning. And so let us look deeper into this idea of learning. Learning is used to refer to some kind of acquisition of mastery of what is already known about something. For example, management studies. It's something is already known and now we are trying to know it. So we are entering that space of learning about management studies, and in the course of time there may be a possibility of mastering some of the principles and concepts related to that. It could be extension and clarification of meaning of one's experience. You have experienced something and now you are looking at a kind of explanation, clarification related to that. So that is also learning. And an organized, intentional process of testing ideas relevant to problems. And in other words, it is used to describe a product, a process, or a function. So all this can be the idea of learning. The process of gaining knowledge and expertise. That is essentially learning. Learning, as we would know, is relatively a kind of a permanent change in one's knowledge, one's perspective, and also behavior due to the experience. For example, I've been learning and practicing an Indian classical dance form. So, over few decades, my perspective towards life, towards work, towards knowing something, and in general, a behavior which is guided through this artistic experience is also learning. So, then there are three components to this process of defining what is learning. One is that the duration of the change is long term rather than short term, that is learning. The second is the locus of the change is the content and structure of the knowledge, which is in the memory or in the behavior of the learner. And the third would be that the cause of this change is the learner's experience in the environment rather than something else, because there can be other changes also that happen when someone engages in something else. It could be some kind of exercise leading to fatigue or some physical condition, some physiological condition. So this is not that change, this is in the learner's experience. So this is how the end result of learning, how it is manifested, that can be mapped and understood. So we can easily agree that concept of learning is a process and not a product. Learning is a change in knowledge, beliefs, behaviors, and attitudes. Learning is not something done to the students, but something that students themselves do. This is a voluntary, organic method. It is not done on someone else. So we can teach someone, but we cannot make the person learn, because learning will be a process done by the learner themselves. And learning changes occur in four domains. One is the skills, cognitive patterns, which is related to knowledge and understanding, how the brain and intellect works, and then in motivation and interest, and in ideology. These are the four domains I want to discuss with respect to learning. So, learning outcomes. Since in today's discourses we often talk about a course and we say, okay, what is the learning objective and what is the learning outcome of that? So, learning in general will include few areas, few kinds of outcomes. One could be motor skills that require practice. Motor skills meaning anything to be done with the limbs, the physical body, the bodily activity. For example, sports. So I am learning to do a kind of somersault, for I am a swimming student. So then I'm learning it. But how I'm learning it, I'm developing the physical skills of it. I'm practicing, and again, the same method is for any sportsman, any dancer, any musician, because your swara has to be practiced so that the vocal cord is able to produce that kind of swara every time. That is one of the learning outcomes, that your swara, maybe on day one the swara was not that good, but over a period of time through practice you develop the physical skill. The second is the verbal information, meaning all the facts, principles, all the information that embody that stream of knowledge. You are able to learn that. That is the one of the outcomes. Then when it is organized and when it is part of a kind of system to use, like the application of knowledge, so then it would be an intellectual skill. That is also something that we may be able to acquire. That may be one of the learning outcomes. For example, I learned the principles of architecture, and now I am using my mind to build a home, design a home. So this would be an intellectual skill that I would have acquired as an outcome of this learning. And then the cognitive strategies, the way how individuals learn, remember, think. They may have their own self-managed skills, how they are managing, they are going to manage what they are learning. And then this would also require defining, designing a pattern, decoding it many a times, and also problem solving, which requires attitude, the right attitude towards looking at what you have learned. So all this would be the learning outcome. For a medical student, he or she may begin by learning the anatomy of the body, the functions, the malfunctions of the body organs, and so on. That would all be in maybe point number 2. But when he or she has continued practicing, and maybe if he or she is a surgeon, you are able to refine your motor skills. That is the outcome that you have acquired over time. But the last one, attitude, is something, it will be a lifelong thing, because that practicing doctor may have to also understand the value of more peaceful, poised way of communication with the patient or with the patient's family, which would require composure, compassion, and wisdom, and the right kind of professional approach. All this will be the attitude that one develops. So, these are some of the domains of learning outcomes. And a great thinker, Roger Silgio, has actually enumerated some of the points related to learning, the process of learning. And I thought, let me begin from a modern perspective and then take you to the Indic perspective. So he says learning is an quantitative increase in knowledge. Learning is acquiring information or knowing a lot. That is true. Usually we engage in that. We want to know more than what we knew earlier. So increase in knowledge. Learning is memorizing. Learning is storing information that can be reproduced. So we memorize many things and we store it in our memory, and we are able to reproduce as and when we are thinking about it and whenever it is needed. The third is learning as acquiring facts, skills, and methods that can be retained and used as necessary. So this would be skills that are related to decoding, understanding, interpreting, even problem solving, and dealing with day-to-day procedures. Learning as making sense or abstracting meaning. Learning involves relating parts of the subject matter to each other and to the real world. Yes. So, looking at the natural phenomenon, looking at the universal phenomenon or the cosmic phenomenon, and trying to make sense of that, or maybe a happening, an experience, and trying to analyze and make some sense of it. That is also learning. I had a bad day, I had a bad experience. Now I want to know why it happened. And then there are many levels of analysis. Some of those analysis could be guided by knowledge, and so it is learning then. Learning as interpreting and understanding reality in a different way, like comprehending the world by reinterpreting the knowledge that we may have acquired. So this generally covers all the kinds of learnings that human being is engaging in the present times. And then Western thinkers have also given some orientations to learning. So there is a behaviorist approach to learning, which is when learning is observed as a change in behavior. Cognitive approach is about an internal mental process. like gaining an insight, a particular kind of perception that we have developed. Then the humanist approach is like a very personal act to fulfill a potential. The social or situational orientation is when learning is observed as an interaction in the social context and as a movement from, let's say, from the periphery to the center of a community of practice. So this is also a kind of learning, a kind of approaches. Empirical approach is like all reliable knowledge is based on experience. The rationalist approach deals with thinking, the idea that thinking is considered the only reliable source of knowledge. You have to be into deep thinking and reflecting, and without any bias, without any emotional connect, and very, very rational way of, that is an approach, rational approach. A pragmatic and socio-historic approach, where knowledge is distributed amongst individuals, tools, and communities, and then it is for the professional practice. So, these are some of the orientations and approaches to learning. Let us come to the Indic approaches and how great thinkers have thought from our immediate past. So, I'm trying to start with something modern, contemporary to the immediate past, and then I want to um, go back in our history, in our cultural history, and look at the idea of learning. So, Rabindranath Tagore, who was a great educator and who was a pioneering figure with his vision on developing a kind of education system that incorporated the best of the world but at the same time had an Indic dimension to it with culture as its core. So he says the highest education is that which does not merely give us information but makes our life in harmony with all existence. So let us analyze and examine this very important statement by Rabindranath Tagore, when he says that not mere information but makes our life in harmony with all existence. What did he mean by that? How does one make one's life in harmony with the existence? So one has to be a believer of naturalism, the natural phenomenon, the cosmic phenomenon, the universal phenomenon, and to agree and accept that we are nothing but a subset, a very small, we can say a negligible unit of the huge cosmic creative machine. And so we are dependent. We can never say we are independent, but we are dependent and interdependent with nature. So that is about one level of existence. The second would be to embrace and accept everything great and inspiring from across the globe. And that is where his second important principle of internationalism was there. So one was naturalism, the second is internationalism, embracing and accepting all inspiring ideologies from the world cultures. The third is about humanism. While acquiring knowledge and while engaging in the process of learning, let us remain humane with human values, compassion, consideration, courtesy, and cooperation. And lastly, idealism, that is about individual growth. One may learn a lot, but one is not following ideals as a human being. So, can one also remain in harmony with oneself? So, this is the kind of vision that he developed and designed Shanti Niketan, and this is how his great quote can make sense for learners like me and you and all of us in the present times. Swami Vivekananda, another great figure who also contributed greatly in building the modern India and looking at the Indic vision of education, where he says that education is the process of bringing out the potential that is latent in every human being. This is interesting because every human being is unique. Every human being is born with some latent potential that is embedded in that person. The learning process, the education process should be such that it can bring it out and highlight it to the best of its potential. And that is where Guru Shishya Parampara is very, very important, because the Guru is able to pay attention to every Shishya and examine the uniqueness of every learner. When I say that, the uniqueness would be some kind of virtues and some kind of limitations, both. That makes that learner unique. So he stated that the very essence of education is concentration of the mind and not collection of facts. And for while we are looking at the concentration of mind, it is also important to remain curious, to have that very innocent, pure curiosity, and to remain creative, because creativity will be the driving force, will be like the prana shakti towards awakening, towards the concentration of the mind, and towards awakening that kind of curiosity for some kind of logical independent thinking. And that's how the learner can upgrade to a higher level of research, which ideally should be the one of the goals for any system of education. So now let us examine how learning works. There are different aspects to it. The first is how the student's prior knowledge. The student may have already gained some basic knowledge about something, and based on that, the learning will have a starting point. The starting point for the learner is one of the key features with respect to mapping the process of learning. So the prior knowledge can actually be a help, but it can also be a hindrance. Because hindrance, why a hindrance? Because the student may already have a preconceived notions about something. That may be misconceptions too. So maybe in the learning process, that particular student may have to work harder towards eradicating the prior knowledge. And sometimes it is helpful when the learner has already been thinking and learning in the same manner. The student's way of organizing the knowledge, whatever he or she is learning, that can impact how the student can apply and learn now. So this is how the learning can continuously work. The third very important thing is about the motivation and interest, because motivation determines, directs, and sustains what students learn and how they learn. To develop mastery, students must develop the skill. So for to learn knowledge, to learn skill, to learn art, there is a different path for everything. There cannot be the same path. Now this is where sometimes in the modern education system we find it challenging, because we have unknowingly followed the same path to teach economics, physics, and dance. But we have to understand that to learn dance, one has to first learn the skill, then the creativity and knowledge. And to learn physics, one has to first intellectually engage with the theoretical principle and then start experimenting and ultimately apply imaginative thinking to be able to uh, develop a kind of um, scientific outlook and understanding that will lead to future mastery. So this is a very important thing. Then the goal directed or goal oriented practice, and along with some kind of feedback, some kind of reflection. When I say targeted feedback that can enhance the learning, I am not simply talking about some feedback form or some response form, which is a common practice nowadays, but learning about a kind of feedback in the sense that whatever we have learned, are we reflecting on what we have learned? And are we reflecting amongst ourselves, amongst our peers and batchmates? And are we also Is the teacher also reflecting? And then are we also reflecting about our own growth? So all this can be kind of a feedback. The level of learner development with the learning environment, the learning climate to impact learning. So this is how learning works differently with different learners and different learning systems and different streams of learning. So the process will essentially involve attention. Then the second level would be a kind of sensation, then developing a perception, and then the image formation. You are able to, it's like an intellectual, the mind starts working with some forms, and that's how knowledge can be stored in different manners. And with any kind of learning system, it's also important to look at the motive. What is the motive of what we are learning, and what is the goal? So motive and goal are not the same. For example, motive is, I want to be a very successful person. I want to be a rich person. This also can be a motive. I want to just help my family lead a very comfortable life. This can be a motive. It is not a goal. It is about one's own emergence and survival and existence, and ultimately the feeling of accomplishment. But goal can be something else. Goal can be, some people can just say that I love to mm, uh, be helpful to people. So my goal for my life would be to serve mankind. Someone may feel that I want to create a business empire and bring employment for all my all my friends and my colleagues and my villagers and people from my community. That can be a goal. And it can also be, I want to delve deeper into this path of creativity, or I want to understand the great India through the philosophical traditions. That can be a goal. Then, at the same time, the barriers. There may be barriers. Could some of those could be financial, physical, natural, but some of those could be thought related, attitude related, and some of those could be circumstantial, situational, and about the kind of environment where we are surrounded. So all this makes a huge difference with respect to learning process. So let us examine these terms: literacy, education, learning, realization, and knowing. In today's times, we are usually very happy in India whenever we say, oh, in our state there is 100% literacy, or there is 70% literacy, there's 90% literacy, and so on. So we have reduced our aspirations many a times to a level where we are actually trying to address the bare minimum requirement. So the beginning point is for us now in the current scenario to at least address the need of remaining literate. Why we are using the word literate? In Hindi and Marathi we say sakshar. So it is related to akshara, meaning you should be able to read and write. Read and write. That is literacy. What you will read and write, that has not been defined. You can read and write anything, but you should know how to read and write. To my understanding, literacy can then limit us to a particular region, a particular cultural context, and a particular set of source of information or knowledge, because we are only engaging our mind with the process of learning a set of letters or alphabets and learning how to decode those into words, expressions, utterances, phonetic expressions, and in the way of a language. So that is literacy. It is essential, but we may not agree with with including only literacy as part of learning. Then education. Education can be at a different level. It can span from the simple idea of sharing some information and facts and methods to deeper levels of understanding and knowing something. Education can actually have a vast range. Now, coming to learning, which is my chosen topic for this lecture. Learning can make us understand a more dynamic process, and I would also call it a more symbiotic process. Why? Because it's a two-way thing. When you learn, you are also in dialogue with something. You are not at the receiving end. Learner is the central point, the epicenter of the entire learning process. So, in that learning process, there is the situation, the environment, the method, the process, the learned person who is teaching, who is imparting knowledge. It can also be an experience. You are just observing something, you are experiencing it, you are learning. So, learner is the epicenter of the learning process, and it's very dynamic, it is organic, it is symbiotic. And why I said symbiotic is because there are other forces around us that are contributing to your process of learning, and that is enhancing your knowledge through observation, examination, understanding, realization, revelation, and so on. And those factors, when they are contributing in making you more learned or um, accelerating and enhancing your learning process, at the same time, we may also be contributing to the learning ecosystem in a different manner. So that's why I call it a symbiotic relationship, because many a times there is a possibility of taking it further, resonating with it, or transferring it, transmitting it, or reverting back, responding to the immediate source. Many a times it is possible. And then realization. Now, this is a deeper level of learning when you have probably been learning something for a while, and now you have started reflecting deeply on what you were learning, and that has taken you to newer frontiers of discoveries. And these discoveries could be defined as realizations. Realization. When the Buddha was trying to know the ultimate truth, what did he do? He was living with, in the modern perspective, if I may reinterpret his search as a research question, just the way a researcher lives with a research question. And he constantly examines, questions, wants to find why it is so. Similarly, the Prince Siddharth was probably delving into a question and was deeply interested to know, what is this truth? How does it work? What is the ultimate truth? And so on. And did he look for an outside source for it? He may have tried, but ultimately he was striking a kind of dialogue with himself, alone, in solitude. That must have been the time when he was also looking inwards, exploring newer avenues of search and discovery. And one day, under a tree, he is blessed with the divine realization. That is when we say unko bodh hua, that enlightenment. So realization can actually be that zone of learning where mind is settled with many information or insights or knowledge and is being processed for a while, and now is the time when that churning and thinking and reflecting and finding is going on. That whole activity of churning has also now slowed down, and now there is a time when the actual outcome of this whole manthan will surface on the mind and will be revealed. So learning can actually be to this level too. And so knowing will have so many different dimensions. I can even say, I know Kranti Chowk is just 4 kilometers from Mahagami. That is also knowing. But Buddha would have said that now I know death is inevitable. That is a different learning because he learned through examination, a deeper examination. So I want all of you to pay attention to what I'm trying to say. So now when I spoke about the 4 quadrants of Indic learning in my previous lecture,
నమస్కారం సార్. థ్యాంక్
I
యూ సార్. మీరు చేశారు. అదేదైనా ఇంకేదైనా ప్రాబ్లం ఏముందా సార్ దాంట్లో?
Roll number 43,
Ah.
please mute yourself. Roll number 43. Sorry, madam, please continue.
So when I was mentioning about the 4 quadrants of Indic learning, and since it is learning, so are we including all the parameters of learning in the 4 quadrants of Indic learning? To my understanding, we may omit literacy. There is, I'm not saying that we should delete it, but it's not probably that important when it comes to discussing about the idea of learning. So we can continue thinking about education in a more formal or informal way. We can continue thinking about the various dimensions of learning, various approaches and scope of learning, about realization and knowing. But literacy may not be that important. I will explain why. Is because we have the Shruti and Smriti, we have these 2 methods. I will come to that a little later. But here I'm giving you few references from the few texts. So one is from the Charaka's Samhita, from the great exponent of Vaidikiya Shastra. So he says that people who live in the villages and different settings, natural settings, should essentially begin their learning by learning about the Aushadhi, different kinds of plants. What are its uses and what are the dangers? That they have to begin. They have to start from that. So it is about the knowledge of natural resources. And then in Rigveda Samhita, there is a verse on what learning includes. So it includes the Adhyayan, it includes Likhita, meaning writing, Pathadi, meaning to recite and utterances and reading, and then about Swadhyaya. So Swadhyaya is self-study. So all these needs to be done. That is learning. Then there is a verse in Sushruta Samhita about occupational wisdom. And it is interesting that it is about the 21st century discourse with NEP and about skill-based learning. So there is a kind of occupational wisdom that has been shared in this text, where he says that the cowherds should engage in first knowing about the forest, the plantations, different kinds of living beings, the cattle and livestock, and this should be the foundation of their learning. So see how diverse we see that learning has been described within the Indic discourse. So education was meant to transmit culture and to remake the new generation in the image of the old. But having said that, it doesn't mean that it is like a copy paste thing. It is like redeveloping something. So there would be 3 steps for this: Shravana, Manana, and Niti Dhyasana. This has been given in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So, learning systems would include pathshalas or vidyalayas, where there would be shikshaka and vidyarthis. Then there would be gurukulas, where there would be guru and the shishyas. Now here I would like to elaborate that sometimes we think Gurukula would be like a cottage and a hermitage, and there would be the guru and the disciples all living together, and it is like a family, and they will all live informally together and learn and teach. The guru would instruct, guide, and the shishyas would learn. It would be free of cost, obviously, because it would be Vidya Dana by the Guru. And in return, the Shishya would do some seva. They would do seva to the Gurukul, to maintaining the day to day chores of the Gurukula, and so on. That is one part of it. But the larger vision of Gurukula was Kula means community. So it is like the community of the Guru. And why it is called a community? Because Guru may have a family too. Maybe the Guru may have his children or wife or husband and so on, and there would be relatives too. But that is not Gurukula. So Gurukula is essentially the community of learners. So here the Kula is identified by not the Kutumba, but the community of learners. And who are these learners? Those who are all focused at the common goal. They all will have the common goal. It is not like today's times where there are 25 students, but each one has different aspirations. After doing my graduation, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this. They will all have different ideas. But when we talk about Gurukula, it is about a community of learners, because the Guru is also the learner. He is the more awakened learner, we can say. And they are all engaging in a knowledge based awakened discourse leading to enhancement of their knowledge. That is the Gurukula. So that is about the learning, but another aspect was about knowledge transmission. So the Shishyas are trained and engaged, motivated to become the next future teachers. So continuation of knowledge, and then preservation of knowledge by copying and writing whatever has been uttered, whatever has been spoken, because the Guru would be imparting the knowledge in the oral format. It would be oral transmission. So the Shishyas in the remaining time during the day, they would also write down, they would document whatever has been taught, whatever has been instructed. And that became the foundation for the future Shastras. So this was the contribution of the Gurukulas. Then we have Shakha.
The coordinators, please mute roll number 43. Gaurav sir, if you are there, please. Sorry, madam, please continue.
Yeah, no problem. So then we would have Shakha. Shakha is a particular direction and stream within a kind of knowledge that would be pursued. So like a sub-discipline, we can say, with a specific approach. And then there would be sadhakas and upasakas of that particular shakha, that particular system. These are some of the systems where knowledge would be imparted and will be shared. The essential energies of the learning system within the Indic context are Swadhyaya, Sadhana, and Anadhyayan. So, Swadhyaya, as you would know, is self study. Sadhana is again repetitive, dedicated practice. And Anadhyayan is very interesting because it is a day that is observed as something that would be about reflecting on what you know and what you want to know, what you have learned, but also resting and passively um, continuing the learning, but not active teaching and learning that day. But not exactly a holiday like we have in today's times. We have professors and teachers who take a leave, they go for a holiday, and they do something very different from what they were doing in their respective departments and institutions. But Anadhyayan is little different. It is not about a holiday, it is just taking a pause from the regular teaching and learning, and that is a day when you are actually, the whole discourse will settle down, maybe, if you want to. But there is no particular activity designed for that particular period of time. This was very important because, as we know, in modern context also, original research can only emerge from that kind of settled mind. Whenever the mind is overactive and too much agitated and into to so many activities, that is not the time when the mind can engage in newer frontiers of imagination and research. So Anadhyayan was an important facility within the Indic knowledge system where the learning process could be enhanced through this kind of a facilitated offering, which was available for both the learners and the teachers, the gurus. Let me share a few thoughts from various texts, Sanskrit texts, on the idea of learning and learner. There is an interesting way of looking at the scriptures. And why? Because scriptures were not just written overnight, these were written after generations of contemplation, reflection, and refinement of what was the Guru Mukhi Gyan. So that is why scriptures did not mean what we think of some of the texts in the modern context, but scriptures were almost like eye openers, because even if we are physically away from the guru or the acharya, still there is a possibility because of the texts. So texts were considered as the eye of the world, and so those who do not pursue it are like almost like blind. This is how one of the texts has highlighted the need to look into the scriptures again. Then there is a text on, there is a verse on how the deeper meaning of learning is about Shuddha Buddhi. And Shuddha Buddhi is about unbiased cognitive intellect. That is what Shuddha Buddhi is. And in many texts, we come across this kind of expression. Even in one of our dance texts, we have a prayer to Ganesha. And unlike today's prayers, where we ask Lord Ganesha for so many blessings, हमारा विघ्न दूर कर दो, हमको ये दे दो, हमको वो दे दो, हमको ये वरदान दे दो, हमारे सारे कष्ट दूर करो. No, in that particular text, it's a text called Abhinay Chandrika, and it's one of the largely referred texts for Odissi dancers. It begins with a prayer and obeisance to Lord Ganesha, where he is worshipped as Namo Chintamanaye. So he is like the jewel of crown of the thought. You are there. You are in that prime space of my mind. Namo Chintamanaye Nityam Shuddha Buddhi Pradayaka. So all that the learner is asking is, please grant Shuddha Buddhi all the time, every day. Please, I just want that. I don't want anything else. So this is how a learner will ask for Shuddha Buddhi. Learner should not ask for, please take away all my problems, please give me all kinds of best things in my life and all. That the learner will have to do through Purushartha and Karma. That he or she will get, but he should ask for Shuddha Buddhi, because that can keep him grounded and interested in the pure spirit of curiosity. That is the core of learning. So these verses remind us about what learning meant in the Indic context. And then again, the 7 enemies of learning is like alasya, mada, then moha, delusion, chapala, and then the stiffness, arrogance, stabdhata, and stinginess. So, all this is not recommended because it will be the biggest enemy for learning. So, there are some cautions also being raised all the time. Whenever knowledge is being transferred, transmitted, there is always a guidance to the learner and for the learning process to remain pure and dynamic. Then, at every level of knowledge, perception, result, it must correspond with the previous stage. This is the philosophy of learning. And then the verse also says that harmony among all elements is essential. So it is able to also address this need of continuation of the process of questioning and understanding it. So once we have understood something, it's not like a frozen idea now and it is like a rigid thing. We are not going to reflect on that. No, we can go back and forth. So this shloka actually reminds us about that. Then the qualities of a Vidyarthi. I really appreciate and like this shloka a lot. It is giving 5 unique qualities, the Pancha Lakshanam of a good Vidyarthi. Who is a Vidyarthi? Vidya means knowledge, and Artha is one who desires it. So, Moksharthi, Vidyarthi, Swarthi. So, Arthi is when you desire, whatever you desire. For I can say I am Nrityarthi, if I may. So, Kakacheshta. What is Kakacheshta? We know about the story of the crow who wanted to drink some water and the water was really down on the bottom of the pitcher. So he tried to bring many pieces of pebbles. Every time he would fly, bring it, and that's how he filled the pitcher. And so the level of water was raised and he could drink water. So this story is very simple. I think children would have loved listening to those. What it talks about is patience and hard work, some kind of goal setting, clear about the intention, and then dividing one's efforts into phases, like bringing one stone at a time, one pebble at a time, but continuously doing it, not failing, not feeling disappointed, and remaining patient. That is Kakacheshta. Then Bako Dhyanam. Baka, the heron, the crane, the bird. So Baka would stand on one foot, patiently waiting for a fish on the water body whenever it can arrive, and then he can patiently take it. So this is Bako Dhyanam. Why it is Dhyanam? Because it needs a meditative state of mind to remain poised and focused on something that we are pursuing. A kind of one-pointed attention. Then Shwana Nidra. Shwana is a dog. So how does a dog sleep? A dog will remain alert even when the dog is sleeping. So that kind of alertness, not just getting lost in the Vishad Nidra, like sleeping forever and it takes a while to get up and then we still feel lazy, and not that, but this kind of sleeping. It is Shwana Nidra. And then Alpahari. Alpahari literally would mean eating less. But that is not what Alpahari means. Some people have interpreted it like that eat less, because if you eat less, you will be able to work hard. But that is not exactly what Alpahari would mean. Alpahari would mean you eat, consume whatever best you feel you would like to eat, and not too much and not too less also, optimum. That can keep you your fuel, your life fuel glowing, growing, so that you can continue the effort of learning. But it would actually mean Alpahari, meaning out of the 5 senses, if we engage too much in eating, that means out of the 5 senses, we are paying more attention to the taste buds. And we are not paying so much attention to the remaining sense organs. So we are depriving ourselves from more sensory information. We are just interested in eating. So alpahari would actually mean restraining yourself and remaining careful about what we want to, what kind of input we want to give to every sensory system. And griha tyagi, meaning not being too much emotionally bound and weak and vulnerable and all the time dependent on someone to push you and motivate you, love you, give you attention and pamper you, and then you would be able to learn. So this is one of the challenges of present day learners and parents, because parents like to do that. They like to keep pampering and pushing their children and cajoling them. ऐसे लगता है कभी कभी कि मना रहे हैं कि प्लीज डू दैट, प्लीज लर्न दिस, प्लीज डू इट एंड लाइक दैट. And too much of engagement of emotional exchange of I would say exchange of emotional, raw emotional energy, raw emotional, because it is not processed, it is unprocessed raw emotional energy about attention seeking, about validation, about entitlement, about transactional emotional transaction is about, you know, you do this for me and then I will do for that. So parents often try to do that. If you study, then I'm going to give you a bicycle. All this is transactional. So griha tyagi is a great quality of a learner, a vidyarthi, who has that open mind to explore the world, and he has that that kind of an emotional maturity and emotional intelligence to leave the comfort zone and for the pursuit of knowledge, for the pursuit of learning. So this is the qualities of vidyarthi. Then coming to shruti and spriti, as I had mentioned earlier, that the mode of education was oral. Even today it is oral, but we do have textbooks also. But we also know that textbooks cannot map and contain all the wisdom and knowledge that has been uttered by the teacher. So over here, Shruti and Spriti is not just about oral transmission. Shruti is about all the revelations that have been heard. So how you have heard it? You can hear it through the, in the form of words of the acharya or the guru. That is one way, one of the options. But other can be, you've heard through some kinds of inspiring anecdotes and inspiration. You yourself are in that zone of that kind of mind space where you wanted to remain inspired. That is the prerequisite for Shruti. So Shruti is not something like an oral, like a podcast or something that you are listening to something and now it is Shruti. It's not that. It's about that mental awakening and mental tuning. And then Smriti represents the traditional texts that are derived from memory, reflecting on the cultural practices, moral guidance, and also based on the Shruti. Now, revelation, now Anubhava has been given a lot of emphasis in the Indic discourse. Why? Because there is a direct experience of learning, and that direct experience of learning is essentially one of the core strengths of shaping the sensibilities of the learner. And also, since this is about the time when there were not built up homes and too many civilized roads and highways and all that, so human beings were almost in the lap of nature. And because they were in this kind of a situation, there was possibility of more intense and deeper dialogue with the cosmic systems, with the natural ecosystems, and with the surroundings. And so this direct experience was not just about some laboratory work inside a controlled environment and testing something, but it was about learning from how the universe and the cosmos is unfolding, and how the body is like a subset and a unit of communication with everything around, and something which is beyond the man. And so the word apaurushaya, which I insist every participant in this session should try and memorize and remember, because this is a unique gift of Indian mind to the world. Knowledge is many a times understood as man-made, but there is a lot that is not man-made. The simple thing like all the solar eclipses and lunar eclipses, has man created those, has man directed those, has man been able to channelize those and time it, schedule it? No. It has been scheduled in a system which is beyond our capacity to even decode. Science is trying to chase these natural phenomena, these cosmic phenomenon, and human mind is trying to closely observe with pure curiosity and understand how it unfolds, how it is happening. When is the next solar eclipse going to happen? Because there is a time in which it is moving, and now human mind is trying to map that time machine and calculate the next solar eclipse. So there are many things that human mind is trying to know, and a larger part of knowledge hence is not man-made. It is discoveries of man based on some phenomenon that is beyond the man. So apaurushaya is a beautiful expression that we find in the Vedas, and it is said that the Vedas themselves are authorless because they are not created by humans, they are apaurushaya. This is an expression to say that we are a lesser being and there is a larger knowledge universe. We are gaining insights based on our anubhava, our direct experience. All this is part of the Shruti, and Smriti is then a derivative secondary work. So, Smriti literature will include the 6 Vedangas, as I mentioned in the previous lecture, the auxiliary sciences in the Vedas, the epics. Epics ko, I think everyone should make note of this. In Sanskrit, it is called Itihasa. So, in Hindi and Marathi, Itihasa would mean history. But in Sanskrit, Itihasa is epics. So these are semi-historical works. So Mahabharata and Ramayana are the Itihasas or epics. Then the Dharma Shastras, the Dharma Sutras, the Artha Shastras, Puranas, poetic literature, some of the Bhashyas. Bhashya are the commentaries. There are commentaries on all the literature that was written. So there have been thinkers who have continuously learned from whatever was written earlier, and they would again try to analyze and retell it. So that retelling is in the form of a commentary, and this commentary, all the commentaries are called bhashyas. So there are many such bhashyas on the Shruti literature or the non-Shruti texts also. And there are other creative works. There are nibandhas. There are literature on writings on politics, on ethics like Niti Shastra, culture, society, and so on. So coming to Swadhyaya, Taittiriya Upanishad, as I said earlier, that every Veda has a few Upanishads also. So one of the Upanishads is taking us to the idea of Swadhyaya in a very different way. Because Swadhyaya essentially is self-study, that we know. But it is connecting Swadhyaya with the very idea of knowing the truth and following righteousness. So then these become the 3 important energies and motivational paths for a learner. So here it says Satyam Vada Dharmam Chara. So speak the Satya, follow the Dharma, and from Swadhyaya never cease, never stop Swadhyaya. So look at the beauty of this learning ecosystem, that we are constantly engaging in all the 3, and only then learning can be enhanced. In Patanjali's Yoga Sutra again, because it is yoga is a philosophy but also a practice-led philosophy. So there we find Swadhyaya in a different manner. That through this Swadhyaya one can discover the divine. And we know that in the Ashtanga Yoga, The second level of the Ashtanga Yoga is Niyam after Yam. So, as part of Niyam, Swadhyay is an important component where Niyam is talking about some kind of discipline and restrictions and constraints and observing some observances. So, there it is talking about Swadhyaya. So, this is an important force in the learning path. Now, again, let me elaborate briefly on Adhyayan and Anadhyayan. I have found these terms very inspiring. Adhyayan is the act of learning, but Anadhyayan, as I mentioned, is not like not learning, but not actively learning. That is what it would mean. So, conditions when Adhyayan is paused, both the learning and the teaching, then it is Anadhyayan. And in the Vedas, it has been mentioned that it could be for three kinds. Maybe some natural calamity, maybe some event, some puja, some offering, some festival happening, so a pause. Or maybe because of some other conditions. But there is a fourth condition also. It is about the individual contemplative dwelling of the learner or the learned, the guru, the acharya. Even then, there can be anadhyayan. There is a time when the guru wants to reflect and think. There are some deeper questions that are arising in the mind. And the guru is now immersed in that kind of reflection, contemplation, and a kind of research. Even that is anadhyayan. So I have given you a verse from Natya Shastra, Bharat Muni's Natya Shastra. This is in the first chapter of Natya Shastra. Usually, the practitioners and learners of performing arts, be it dance, music, or theatre, they don't learn about the first chapter of Natya Shastra because it doesn't deal with the practical utility or application of the movements or acting. But here we find the core of learning, the core philosophy of learning in the first chapter of Natya Shastra, where the very second verse is mentioning Anadhyaye. So, this is the beginning of the writing of Natya Shastra, where we can understand from this text that Bharata Muni, who was a guru, an acharya, and he had almost 100 students, he is observing Anadhyayan. He is not teaching that day. So he is probably reflecting and resting in his own hermitage or cottage. But this is the day when the Shishyas come to him for an informal discussion. And not just that. Indra, Brahma, Shiva, the Daityas, Gandharva, Apsaras, they all participate in the discussion. So it's like a casual, informal coming together and just discussing. And through this discussion, the whole Natya Shastra unfolds. It is sort of revealed, the whole practical guideline of how it is to be done, how this can be done. There are some questions and discourses. All this is then narrated in the 36 chapters of Natya Shastra. So, what I want to explain is that Indic learning system was essentially about dialogue, discussion, and discourses. There would always be a dynamic activity between the learner and the learned. It was never a one-way channel. We find ample examples from various Shastras and from the Vedas and various texts. Even in Natya Shastra, as I've shared this text, in the later verses, you would see that there are constant questions. Someone is asking a question. Can you explain this? Does this mean this? Do you mean to say it means like this? So can we deduce that this would mean that? And so then there is a kind of discussion, a kind of suggestion and elaboration and explanation on that. This is how the texts were developed, based on some kind of dialogue. In fact, most of the ancient scriptures are in the form of question and answer. They are not in the form of present day textbooks where there is a chapter scheme and there would be one title and then the second title and the third and so on. It's not like that. Usually we will also find that there is a circular journey in dealing with the content, because there is something that has to be dealt with at a preliminary level, and then you move forward with some more information and knowledge, and later on you would again want to come back and now re-explain it with deeper insights. So it sort of follows a circular path. That is very interesting. And essentially, the component of dialogue, questioning, clarifying, that is very, very important. It is wrong to think that the Shishya should not ask questions. They should ask, but the questions should be guided by this pure interest and curiosity. That is the spirit of learning. So let me define briefly the kinds of teachers. There have been teachers whom we can say preraka. So they are the ones who motivate. Then suchaka, the ones who direct. They will guide you. Do this, do that. Bodhaka are the ones who will awaken. You will probably go through a transformation with them. Bodhaka. And vachaka, who constantly read, talk about it, explain. And shikshaka are the ones who generally teach whatever has been learned by them, they will continue teaching. So they are the shikshaka. So in the Indic mapping of teachers, shikshaka is supposed to be the beginning point. That is when you, whatever you've learned, you are continuing to teach. But later on, you will read, reflect, and explain. Then vachaka. Bodhaka is when you have the awakening and you want to also continue the path of awakening with your disciples. Suchaka is also a kind of 360 vision. Or let him do this also. Maybe that will be very good for him because he has this skill. Or if he doesn't have that skill, let me try. I am going to try this with him. So that is another role of learning and teaching. And preraka, who constantly through example, self-example and through inferences is able to constantly motivate. Now looking at the goals, this has been an important aspect of Indic learning to constantly examine the four purusharthas, the four goals. Always knowledge and learning should be guided by these four ideas of the dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. So a patra is the learner. I've given a symbolic picture for you to look at how a learner should be, how a learner can look as representatively. So he's like a container. A learner is like a container. Whatever the guru and acharya is giving is being settled inside the container. An ideal learner can be like a patra. He can hold whatever has been given to him. But there can be other situations too. Like the patra has holes. So whatever has been given is again, it leaks out. Or the patra has cracks, so it doesn't contain enough. And or maybe the patra is not oriented properly. So the guru is giving the vidya, but the patra is not looking there, is not curious enough, is not oriented. That is the thing. So today we are very precautious and sometimes we want to conduct orientation program because we think that through a kind of active dynamic process we may want to orient the learner so that he or she is able to receive the knowledge. So this is an important analogy of thinking of the learner as a container. And then when the learner is like a container, a living container, I would say, we have to examine the gunatraya. Gunatraya is the three gunas, the sattva, raja and tama. So sattva is like the more pious and peaceful and more settled, harmonious, whereas raja is too much activity, too much pride, and too much enthusiasm and ambition, too much. And tama is all the toxic energies. So there needs to be sattva, but a little bit of raja and tama. That balance can actually aggravate the process of learning for a learner and also the teacher. Rena also, because this is the purpose of our life. We are born with three depths. That is the Indic philosophy. And one of the depths is to the divine, and it can be literally explained like doing the yajnas and all. But what is a yajna? Like Santa Gyaneshwar talks about the yajna karma, jani je yajna karma. So what is yajna karma? Every day is learning, practicing, remaining humble, and paying our respect and gratitude. That is the devarina. That is what we have to continue. Then pitri rina, it is to our ancestors. So, in the Vedic system, they've asked to do these rituals. But in today's context, I would insist that whatever our forefathers have done and whatever good they have done, to continue that legacy and remaining good human beings and compassionate to everyone. And Rishi Rin is about the knowledge, about the swadhyay, about the tapas, about the seeking of knowledge. That let that burning fire, that yajna is not actually just one physical squarish thing with the fire, the physical fire. Yajna actually in the Vedas talks about the flame of knowing. So let that flame continue. Let it remain blazing with newer desire of learning. So that is about the Rinatraya. Ultimately, we have to leave this mortal world because our mortal body will have a limited span of time. But whenever we are moving forward in time, let us be aware that this Gunatraya and Rinatraya has to be part of our learning consciousness. So, to conclude, I would encourage all the participants today to think of learning as an ecosystem. Why an ecosystem is because we are all stakeholders, we are all participants, we are all components of that, dynamic components of that, and together we can create a beautiful learning ecosystem, or we can damage it also. The learner and the learned both are equal participants with equal capacities, and not to forget that the learner can be a learned in the course of time, but the learned will always remain a learner. That is very important. So there is a constant learning, continuous learning, evolving, just like nature. And that's why I think of ecosystems, because just like plants and saplings, they grow as trees, great lush green forests, and so is our vidya, so is our knowledge. It can be like an aranya, like a forest. So it can have a humble beginning as a grassland, but can evolve as a forest. So just like nature, the act of learning can be continuous, vast, expanding, exploratory, expansive, and so on. And within this discourse, where is Vidya, Dan, Diksha, and Dakshina today? That is one question that has remained with me. I have learned from my gurus in one of the most um, simple and sacred methods, without any pretension, without any kind of showcase and expression of capacities, economic capacities, and social capacities. We have learned under our great gurus in the most humble manner. There was never a system where we would pay a huge sum of money to present our solo performance on stage just to showcase our art and get some kind of media coverage. Our gurus never tried to doing that also over their rich artistic journey. What they taught was to remain true and pure to the art form that we were learning, and to remain pure to the learning system. I have tried continuing this system with my disciples. It is it seems to be simple, but it's not that simple because it's very challenging in the modern scenario to remain adherent to a system which is not about commercial and financial demands. Having said that, if Vidya is a dana, then what happens to the Guru? Can the Guru sustain himself, or should we continue the Gurukula system of the economic model of Gurukula system where the disciple should be there throughout the day and night as a serving force and as a proactive force to continue the Gurukula, which is a learning space. In that manner, it would have worked well in the older times where there would be just simple chores to be done at home, like washing, cleaning, and so cooking, and so on, which collectively all the shishyas and the guru can do. And in that manner, if the shishyas can do something like this, the guru can impart training, and so it's a mutually sustainable way of living where the guru will not have to work somewhere else to earn a living, and then he can do the Vidyadana. Or there were other models where the kings would grant some kind of patronage and the Gurukulas could work. In the modern scenario, we have philanthropies, we have organizations, we have we have charitable organizations, non-profit organizations that are trying to bridge this kind of gap in the society and sustain the Gurukula philosophy. So Vidya can be a dan when it is a kind of gifting knowledge with that pure heart, without the economic financial transaction. Let it be the spirit, let the spirit be like that. And then about the Diksha, it is something to be discussed over the coming years because the word Diksha has also been borrowed from the Indic learning system and has been taken in the university nomenclature too. So it will be a matter of deep interest and research for some of the educators to re-examine the term Diksha, and I would also like to create a kind of narrative around that. And then about the Guru Dakshina. One may, in many ways, want to thank the Guru, thank the Acharya through gifts or through whatever may please the Guru or the disciple. That these are just simple gestures, these are symbolic gestures, these are not the ones that mean much in the teaching learning system beyond a time, because when we think of learning as transformative, then it is, and when we think of learning as the Chatur Purushartha and the ultimate goal of becoming an awakened living being, then these things can be just the tangible part of the great eternal feeling of remaining grateful and humbled by this Vidya Dan by the Guru. So I conclude my presentation with a verse from one of the texts which pays obeisance to the great scholarly assembly, the Sabha, and they are like the Ratnas, with because they are the learned people and who are trying to dwell through this unfathomable ocean of wisdom. We all are sailors in that. The prayer, which is very close to my heart, and we recite it almost every day after our dance class, is a prayer about the teaching learning process, is about the Guru and the Shishya, and then how they are co travelers. They together co create the learning ecosystem. So let us recite this prayer. Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahe Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for giving the lecture. It was a very exhaustive and a very informative lecture. A very heartful gratitude to you, ma'am. And when we talk, usually when we are talking about you, that is Guru Parvati Datta, it is always for our department, my colleagues and my students, you are always, we think you as a synonym with the preservation and promotion of India's intangible heritage. And I know you since last 2 decades, 20 years altogether, and we meet along many a times. But I would really like to say that it was an honor knowing you very closely and witnessing you with the unwearing, the commitment which you have towards the institute, the creative brilliance, because I have come to the your Mahagami and seen a lot of programs over there. And last but not the least, the way you nurture the classical traditions. It is very noteworthy. It is very fascinating. And seeing you since last 20 years, we have not changed. The same way, very elegant, very beautiful, and the way you speak. There are so many things we can learn from you, ma'am. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation and coming for this forum to deliver a wonderful lecture. I hope the students, the participants have acknowledged themselves with lots of things related to Indic knowledge. Over to you, roll number 39. We would formally thank you, madam. Just stay
Yeah.
tuned for some time.
Thank you
Yes.
so much, Madhuri ma'am. On behalf of the organizers of this online refresher course on IKS skill-based in curriculum development and all the participants, I am Nahida Manviwala from Rizvi College of Education, Mumbai, deem it an honor to extend a warm vote of thanks. Guru Datta ma'am, in your first lecture, you unfolded the 4 quadrants of Indic learning: Vidya, Kala, Shilpa, and Sadhana. You revealed how education in Bharat was always holistic, weaving together knowledge, creativity, skill, and discipline into a sustainable model of learning. Equally inspiring were your reflections on the nature of learning itself as a voluntary, organic change in thought, behavior, and disposition. Your second lecture, which guided us to the very heart of learning and the learner, reminded us that learning being organic, it brings a change in the disposition and behavior of the learner. You highlighted how it spans into 4 domains of skill, cognition, motivation, and ideology, and how the learner is always at the epicenter of this journey. Drawing upon timeless wisdom, you reminded us that true knowledge must be rooted in humility, dialogue, and the true spirit of inquiry. For these insights that harmonize tradition with modern pedagogy, we are indeed really grateful to you, ma'am. I also take this opportunity to thank Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Marathwada University, Chhatrapati Shivaji Nagar, and UGC Malviya Mission Training Center for creating such a meaningful platform and encouraging us participants to attend this program. Our thanks also goes to Dr. Madhuri Sawant, the coordinator of this course, the resource team, Dr. Rafe and Mr. Gaurav, for your continuous support and mentoring. Professor Datta, your session has inspired us to see education not just as an act of teaching, but as a transformative dialogue that balances between knowledge and brings a balance between knowledge with creativity, skill, discipline, and learning with humility. We again thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. We are running to question, if ma'am permits.
Sure, sure, please.
Participants, do you want to go for the questions?
Hello, ma'am. This is my first lecture. I have no question, ma'am, because
Okay,
ma'am
okay, okay.
explained all things in a very, very outstanding, lucid language. And thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, ma'am. I think there are no questions, so we would like to end this session now. Thanks again for coming. Namaste.
Thank you.